The scripture reading is from Matthew, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 12, and this is Jesus on the Mount of Beatitudes. And you'll remember this, but just to refresh your memory, this is where he says things like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." He goes on to say, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." That was just a part of the passage, so when you get a chance, read Matthew 5, 1 through 12, but today's message is titled, "Breaking the Negative Cycle." One of the most destructive foibles of human nature is the tendency to lock ourselves into rigid patterns of thinking, into ruts of responding, and unalterable avenues of acting. It was this way of thinking that caused Jesus to condemn the Pharisees, admonishing them about straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel. There's a lot of research on this topic today about getting caught in a negative cycle. There's two ways we as humans can react to life. We can have two mindsets. We can have the mindset of being a lifelong learner or having a growth mindset, or instead having a fixed mindset where we don't adapt, we don't constantly learn, we don't evaluate things. And there's interesting research right now from Carol Dweck on fixed and growth mindsets. If you get the opportunity, take a look at that. Interesting stuff. But I doubt if there's anything more devastating to daily living, to our effective functioning, to creative and growing relationships, and nothing is more dramatically counter to the Christian spirit and style than to be ensnarled in a negative cycle, into a fixed mindset. On every level of life, it is easy to surrender to the negative forces that sap our energy and drag us down. We face that every day. I don't know about you, but I don't really like the icebreaker parts of meetings. Maybe you've experienced this yourself, but at a conference for ministers, groups were organized into small groups for dialogue. They were to begin their dialogue by using one word to describe the world as they saw it today or as they responded to it. The words came in torrents. They were words like stagnated, alienated, frustrated, broken, estranged, and unfocused. Every word was a negative word. But there was one minister in the group who was marching out of step. His one-word response to the world as he saw it was amazement. You see, he had broken the negative cycle. It wasn't that he was unaware of the conditions being reflected by the other ministers. It was his attitude. You've heard this many times before. It's not what happens to you in life that is important. It is how you react to what happens to you in life. It's Viktor Frankl. Even the way he said the word was different when he said amazement. Nothing is more necessary for fruitful living. Nothing is more in tune with the Christian spirit and style, and nothing furthers our quest for Christian wholeness than to break the negative cycle. If you and I are going to be whole, if we are to live with confidence, and if we are to effectively witness to the Christian faith that we claim, we must come to the point, not where we hide from reality, but where we decide in the face of reality to give ourselves to those positive powers of redemption and renewal that are at work in ourselves, in our church, and most certainly at work in the world. We must break the negative cycle, claiming the truth that greater is He that is within us than he that is in the world. In the light of that, let's sound some signal truths. You and I need redemption, and we need renewal. First, there is a place for the negative. We dare not delude ourselves into thinking that we can positively think ourselves into whatever we wish. There is power in positive thinking, but not that much power. No life is completely honest that cannot engage in sincere self-criticism. A nation or an institution or an individual or a church that is unaware of imperfections or unwilling to acknowledge those imperfections will simply be poisoned by them sooner or later. It will catch up with you. So self-criticism is necessary. I think we are all our worst critics. I know that I am. And we should practice introspection. This is good. The discipline of looking at ourselves honestly and seeing clearly where we are and what we are about. Our purpose, though, must be clear. By self-scrutiny, we're not to drown ourselves in the ugliness that social psychologists like Freud saw seeping up out of our subconscious. Not at all. Introspection is a process of opening the blinds that the sun might illuminate the dark rooms of our life. It is the deliberate self-conscious exposure of the limitations and sins of our life to the healing and forgiving light of Christ, who is the divine power. Such a disciplined function, like a skilled physician probing the body and diagnosing a malignancy, the doctor doesn't do that simply to identify the malady or to be preoccupied with it or to enjoy their findings. The physician does it in order that they might remove it, to cut it out, to rid the patient of it, so that the patient's body might be strong and free from this life-destroying power. So there is a place for negative in your life and in mine. A second truth is that sometimes we have to deny in order to affirm. Think about this. To dwell in the land of negative, to wallow in self-criticism and guilt, as many people I know do, is to cripple ourselves. You and I need to learn the value of the negative and see its place in life, and when we gain that perspective, we can deny in order to affirm. So think about this. Our no saying, if it is healthy, is really another way of saying yes. A young person, for instance, at a particular period in the maturing process, begins to feel the need to get away, and parents chafe under that expression. The apron strings are no longer comfortable. The child's dependency becomes a drag, so he musters all the courage that he has to say no to the comforts of home, no to the security of the cozy family. But this is healthy. If this child is saying no to those things in order to say yes to the demands of maturity, yes to the adult responsibilities we must begin to assume, there is a place for the negative. And sometimes we need to deny in order to affirm. Jesus marked the way. If any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever will lose his life for my sake in the gospel will find it. Think about this in your daily life. There are often times where we are sidetracked or we are spread so thin that we feel ineffective. So it's necessary for us to say no to certain things in life so that we can say yes to those things which are truly important. One aspect of denying in order to affirm is the principle of delayed gratification. This is a problem in today's world. Let me ask you, have you heard of the marshmallow experiment? Take a look at it when you get the opportunity. The marshmallow experiment. It was done many years ago. This was a longitudinal study where young children were exposed to an experiment, and then they were tracked over a long, extended period of time. So I won't give that away, but when you get the opportunity, look at the marshmallow experiment. There's a lot of research on this. One of the paramount problems of our times is that unbridled drive for pleasure and immediate gratification. This is the source of materialism run wild. It's what I call the drive-through society. We want pleasure and we want it now. Discipline is a forgotten word. We know little or nothing about delayed gratification. We need to learn to deny in order to affirm. Jesus knew it. Think about this. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will find it. This is the ultimate in saying no in order to say yes, of denying in order to affirm, and that leads to a third truth. There is power in the positive. If anything exceeds our need to say no, it is the necessity of saying yes. Have you ever noted the way the ministry of Jesus is introduced in the Gospel of Mark? It's a marvelous opening chapter there. The meaning of his coming is caught up in the memory of that Old Testament prophecy from Isaiah. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, upon them has light shined. And from that time on, the gospel says, Jesus began to preach and to say, you must change your hearts, for the kingdom of heaven has arrived. It is as though Jesus is saying the kingdom is here. You don't have to walk in darkness. Life is yours, and life is not just a matter of negatives. So change your minds. Get a new heart. Break the negative cycle. Look at the Beatitudes from today's scripture lesson. You can't hear these invitations to happiness with any degree of seriousness without having your mind stand at attention, turn around in its tracks and say to you, wait a minute. There's something new here. There's something fresh. Listen. Look at just one of the Beatitudes. When men revile you and persecute you and utter all manner of evil against you falsely. Now that's a rather negative experience, isn't it? But look at the amazing twist that Jesus was able to put on it. How blessed are you when that happens, he says. Don't wallow around in it. Don't be dragged down by a persecution complex. Don't think the world is coming to an end. Don't play victim. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward. There's power here. Jesus is calling you and I to break the negative cycle because Jesus is the divine yes. And in him, every promise of God has received its affirmation. And you and I can lay hold of those promises through him.